the face of it, a Singlecut Tremolo is a very, very oxymoronic guitar. You have, of course, the Singlecut shape, which is a Les Paul, a Gibson trademark. Give me a second, I'm going to disconnect this. It's a piezo guitar. I do not want the piezo getting discharged. Not that it gets discharged that quickly, but we digress. So, you have the Les Paul shape, and then you have a very, very Fender-like tremolo. In fact, Gibson itself doesn't really make many Singlecut tremolo guitars. It makes something called a Les Paul Access. But because that has a Floyd Rose, that is a very, very specific taste. So, while this guitar is kind of a hybrid of a thing that should not be, it's worth examining why something that shouldn't work somehow just works so well. And in fact, over the years, I've come to the conclusion that this particular kind of guitar is one of my favorites. So why should it not work? Think of the Singlecut shape. The Singlecut shape is not exactly the most practical shape out there. And, of course, it has got a classic look about it, and for those who seek a classic look, who seek to recreate that magic from the rock and roll era, it makes sense. But otherwise, a double cut is almost more ergonomic in every single kind of way. So when you have plenty of double cut tremolo guitars, what's the point? What's the point of even going there? Well, I think there is a point. And the reason there's a point is because there are a lot of players who are Gibson Les Paul players, and I would count myself amongst them. And what happens is when you play a Gibson Les Paul, or in my case an Epiphone Les Paul, for a very, very long period of time, the Singlecut shape just becomes home. And initially you have a lot of pseudo bravado kind of arguments, you discount all the problems. It's heavy, so what? Doesn't matter, I can carry it. Slash carries it. You can't access the upper frets that easily on a Les Paul, who cares? Look at how well he plays November Rain. Stuff like that, right? You have all the silly arguments. In fact, the first Gibson Les Paul I got was a Les Paul Traditional 2014, which was heavy, super thick neck, everything. All the traditional, not 59 appointments, but the traditional appointments. And over time, I realized that there is a reason why some of those appointments aren't very desirable, and it's not for everyone. But the Les Paul shape, the hankering for the Les Paul shape remained. Now after maybe 8-9 years of playing PRS, I like the PRS shape, but the Singlecut shape still remains home for me. So while the Singlecut shape remains home, I do wish that there are certain improvements. I don't want to lose out on the thick neck. I like the thick neck, but it doesn't need to be as thick as a 58, maybe 59-ish is about okay. I like the shape, but I don't necessarily need it to weigh a ton. And I don't necessarily need the body to be super thick. I've gone back and forth with this, but then the more you sit looking at videos and just playing a guitar now and then, thick body doesn't bother you, but the more you actually play standing up and playing with a band, the more you're like, you know what, something lighter, something thinner would be good. And then, of course, the more you expand your boundaries beyond just rock and roll, then you realize the utility of something like a tremolo. And that's where, honestly, this particular guitar comes in. This is not a guitar that PRS makes anymore, and honestly what I have is not even a stock example. This is a private stock. But I'll talk a little bit about the concept of a Singlecut Trem. It was a model that existed, I think, between 2000, I think 3 or 4-ish, till maybe mid-2010s. It was, as I understand, an interesting byproduct because Gibson sued PRS for coming up with a Singlecut shape. So they released a Singlecut Trem model, which was completely different from a Les Paul because it had a tremolo. So that was something I think Gibson couldn't sue, so they could continue, I guess, justifying the investment they had made to create the Singlecut line. I'm guessing. I don't know the story perfectly, but I do know that the Singlecut Trem came as a consequence of that era. This, for me, has a lot of the things solved from a Singlecut point of view, yet retaining the core essence that Singlecut players like me like. And it really brings the Singlecut into the modern era. And At this point, you're probably shouting something in the background, Tremonti, Tremonti, Tremonti. And I'll talk a little bit about why the Tremonti, though it's also a single cut trem, is a little bit dissimilar in concept, and I'm not saying each one is right or wrong, but you will see that there is a difference, and that difference is something to be appreciated. So, 3 things to note about a single cut tremolo. It has a thick neck, unlike a Tremonti. This usually has something called a wide fat neck, which is like today's pattern neck, which is like a thinnish 59 neck, but still reasonably substantial. That's number 1, so it comes with a thick neck. Tremonti comes with a thin neck, remember that. Secondly, unlike a Tremonti, it comes with a thinner body. This is like a McCarty thickness, maybe slightly more. The Tremonti comes with a full fat thickness. A 594 single cut comes with a full fat thickness. This comes with a thinner, thinner. So both of these things are very interesting because the Tremonti is like a very specific flavor of super Les Paul. It's like a super Les Paul, like I've said many times on my channel. It's a very specific flavor. And Tremontis are usually heavy because Mark Tremonti himself likes his guitars heavy. So if you look at the Tremonti, for me, as much as I love that guitar, I've been through many Tremontis, it doesn't take away from the weight of a Les Paul. And it doesn't give me the thick neck that I fancy on a Les Paul. And the main reason I've sold my Tremontis usually, I still have 2. The original Tremonti and the Tremonti baritone hybrid. But the main reason I've sold my core Tremontis is the neck has just been too thin for me. Unless you're a 60s neck player, which some people are, 60s Gibson neck player, the single cut trem's neck is much more to your liking. And to me, it's much more to my liking. So that's one thing. And secondly, the thinner body of the single cut. Initially, I thought I would hate it. Then I got a single cut trem. Ironically, I didn't get a core. I got a SE, Michael Ackerfeld from Opeth model. And I realized, you know what? Enough bravado. Actually, the thinner body suits me. So that's the other thing about it. And then, of course, you have the brilliant PRS Tremolo. All the advantages that you typically get on a custom 24. It stays in tune. You can do whatever you want with it. It just adds a completely different dimension to the guitar. The other interesting thing is the tonal differences between a single cut trem and a Tremonti and a Les Paul. A single cut trem, to my ears, now this is a very, very specific example, so don't necessarily take this tone sample. This guitar has a rosewood neck, has a swamp ash body, and it kind of amplifies one of the aspects that I typically notice. But the single cut trem tends to be having a much more modern, a much more clearer sound than a Les Paul. Which again, for modern applications, for live applications, is really good. It's not quite as thin sounding as a custom 24. I'm using the word thin very carefully because the custom 24 is not a thin sounding guitar. But if you play a Les Paul, say at R9, and you play a custom 24, or you play a Gibson USA Les Paul, the differences are very stark. And especially if you play the Gibson USA Les Paul followed by a custom 24, you will immediately notice that the custom 24 sounds much more, there's a lot more low end in the Les Paul, which isn't there in the custom 24. This thing is somewhere in between, which works out quite well. This particular guitar is even brighter. It's almost in custom 24 territory, but it's not quite there, and it retains a little bit of that sweetness. One interesting thing to note with the single cut trem, and that could be not a divisive point, but an important point to note is the scale length. It is a 25-inch scale length, same as a custom 24, same as a Tremonti. Now I think if this guitar had a 24.5-inch scale length or a 24.594 scale length, that's like a 594 there already, it would be a very, very interesting guitar and probably even more closer to that Les Paul sound. Those guitars do exist. There is a guitar called the SC245, which had a special tremolo, trem equipped, typically comes with a hardtail. It had a special trem equipped run. So that's something to consider if you're looking at it. So yeah, so while on the face of it, it's a little, may seem silly to take an outdated design and put modern appointments on it. Surprisingly, it works out really well. Now, a little bit on this guitar, because again, people who know what single cut trems are already saying, what is this? This is not a typical single cut trem, and it isn't, because a single cut trem typically does not have a Les Paul like switch here. It has it here, McCarty style, and it has 2 knobs. Master volume, master tone. The reason I got this particular guitar, because it has piezo, very interesting. It has Graphtex saddles. It's a private stock. It's a special build from 2013, I think. And it has similar to a Les Paul layout, but do not be confused, it's not exactly the same. There's a master volume, tones for each of the pickups, and piezo on off and piezo volume. So it's a bit different. And it's semi-hollow, if you can tell. So this thing is even lighter, it's even more ergonomic, and yet it's not neck heavy or bottom heavy like some Les Pauls are. It's just perfect. Thing I particularly like about this guitar, the rosewood neck combined with the semi-hollow construction help this guitar have the sweetness that I want, yet have a fair amount of cut through, and it's a bit more of a, especially in the middle positions, it has a lot of single coil like sparkle that you don't get on an all mahogany rosewood, mahogany neck, mahogany body guitar. So that's what I really like about it. Okay, so hope you have learned something about an unusual model. Hopefully you understand why it may make sense for some people, especially people like myself, Les Paul and PRS enthusiasts, so to speak. And maybe if you, and the best, sorry, I forgot the best part. These things are a bargain used. They really are cheap because they're mid-2000s PRSs, which are kind of at their lowest point in terms of resale value today. So if you can find a good single cut trem, do not be confused or or be discouraged by this unusual combination. This may just be the right guitar for you and the guitar that you're looking for. I've been on a bit of a single cut trem ravaging spree of late. I have bought 6 of them. That's one of the reasons why I'm selling a lot of my Gibsons, because I'm like, you know what? I've spent too much time, long and hard. I know what I like now. I don't play any of my Les Pauls. I wish some of my custom 24s were single cuts, some of my PRSs were single cuts. So screw it, I'm just going to go with what I know I like. I like PRSs, I like single cuts, I like trems. And lo and behold, 15-20 days into the experiment, I'm extremely happy. And I feel like, okay, finally I've decided what I like, and I'm going to keep this. So, and this guitar is my favorite out of the lot. I'll cover the others in upcoming videos. Alright, hope this was fun. Till next time.